good evening, Bert. Thanks for joining. It's great having you here. Can we just start with a short introduction?
Yeah, first of all, very, very nice to be here. Thank you for having me. It's really, really looking forward to the things we're going to be talking about today because it's not stuff that I get to talk about necessarily every day, but it's things that I'm really passionate about. So anyway, thanks for having me here. My name is Bart Farrel. I'm 35 years old. I'm from the United States, from Northern California, but I've been living in Spain for the last 10 years, and I currently work as the community leader of the Data on Kubernetes Community, which is a group of practitioners that are focused on working on very advanced technologies in the cloud, particularly related to data. But as you'll learn later on, I don't come from a technical background. I have a different background, and I've been working in tech for the last 6 years, but I always say from on the human side, related to communication, organizing events, talent management, human resources, building communities in the past when we used to have in-person meetups, but now doing that in a virtual way. I've also got involved. I got involved about four and a half years ago, working on audiovisual production projects, specifically videos and some podcasts. But always, once again, on the more human side of meeting people, organizing things, and putting things together in that way. So not really on the technical side, but on the other side is what I would say. So yeah, that's a bit about me. But like I said, I'm sure we'll get into more details later on.
Okay, great. So you said you are from US and you have shifted to Spain now. Usually it's the other way.
Yeah, it's true. That's very true. Well, there is a story behind that. So I ended up in Spain. I never planned on actually living in Spain. This is a really good thing that I always like to say. Like there's a quote from a John Lennon song that life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. And that's kind of what happened to me, is that when I was 23 years old, I finished my university. Or when I was 22, I finished university. I worked for a year. And when I was 23, I left the United States and I moved to Egypt in 2009 to learn Arabic. I was interested in the area and the culture and the language. So I went there, and originally I was only going to stay for 1 month, and I ended up staying for a year. While I was there, I was teaching English to refugees from South Sudan, which was a really cool experience. And while I was there, I also met a person who's from Spain, who is now my wife. And so after 1 year in Egypt, I spent a year living in London, and then moved to Spain. Like I said, it'll be 10 years in August, so quite soon.
Wow. In India, or maybe in most Asian countries, IT is the most important source of employment. Most of the people, even irrespective of their education, land up in the IT industry. But there is a kind of resistance. Like I had a friend who is an electronic engineer, and he was a bit nervous about joining IT industry. He said, "How can I work here? Will I be able to cope up?" I told him, "Here is a guy who studied something entirely different, and is now rocking in the IT industry." How did you manage this change?
That's a good question. I'm not going to say that there have been some parts of it that were a little bit, I don't want to use the word scary, but challenging, like in the beginning. But I've always been lucky to have been trusted by other people. And so that's actually interesting too, is that your knowledge level is really important, but your ability to establish trust and work well with people and be open and welcoming, the more that you can work on those skills, which aren't skills that are generally taught in school or university, I'll say that much too. It's extremely important. And one of the things that I do is that I'm involved in the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. I'm an ambassador there. And one of the biggest things that people have to realize is that these projects move forward because of people who are friendly, who are caring, who establish spaces of trust, who respect each other, even if they're from different countries or cultures or religions or all those different things, and support each other. So like, I think that those things are really, really important. That's what I've learned. It was difficult though. When I first started, like, yeah, you have to learn a lot of technical vocabulary, and there's still a lot of things that I don't know. But if you are able to establish good connections with people, then when you have those questions, they're happy to help you. And then there will be situations where they will need help with other things, and you can step in and use the skills that you have that maybe they don't have as much. So that's what's worked well for me.
Okay. So what are these skills? How does one develop them?
That's a good question. I think we're actually always in some phase of development of them. We're just not conscious of it because no one gives you a certificate for empathy. Also, if you think about this, I always say this: how many classes are there out there for public speaking? There are tons. But how many classes are there for listening? Not that many. And there should probably be more. And listening is much more than just, you talking and me being quiet. And then when you stop talking, then I start talking again. You listen with your eyes, you listen with your ears, you listen with your body language, you listen with your tone of voice, you create different atmospheres doing that. So it's just, I think it's a lot of it is sitting down and looking at those different elements of what we call, soft skills or transversal skills or different kinds of skills that aren't necessarily as quantifiable as other technical skills. I think it's just being conscious of that and knowing that it's something, and also asking for feedback. That's a big thing. And so I think that comes down to transparency. Everybody should try to be as transparent as possible. Like we don't have to share absolutely everything, but the more that we can be vulnerable and that we can accept feedback and ask for feedback, I always tell people, I know that there are many, many things that I'm very bad at, right? And that I will always be bad at. It doesn't mean that I can't try to improve, and I should try to improve. But I don't need to feel bad about not being good at everything. And I think it's better to be honest with people about your limitations than trying to act like you're perfect at everything, because nobody's perfect. So I think that's really a crucial element, is looking inwards, which is something that's very scary for a lot of people. It's much easier to always look at other people, to judge other people, or compare yourself with other people. But if you really look inside and you say, okay, looking at my skill set, like typical things, what they call like the SWOT analysis, like strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. In the same way that you can do that for a company or for a project, you can also apply that analysis to yourself, and you'll learn a lot. But also as well too, ask your family, ask your friends, like, what do you think I'm good at? Or what do you think I should improve? When you show that openness, for me, that's one of the most human things that you can do, in inviting people to participate in your improvement process.
Okay, that's a good point. Very few people ask for feedback.
Sorry?
I said very few people ask for feedback. That's
yes, yeah. And it's something also, how can you improve if you don't know what you need to improve? Like you don't know what you don't know. So there are different ways that you can do this, but you can do this at an early age. Like, okay, like I said, you can ask your parents and friends. If you're in university, ask your professors. Like one of the things that I did, I made a lot of mistakes in university, but one of the things that I did really well is that I took advantage of when my professors had office hours, so I could go there and like ask them specific questions, but also ask them like in a kind way. Oh, I didn't get the grade, the mark that I wanted to on this essay. I'm not saying, why didn't I get a higher mark? I say, what are the things that I could improve so I could do it better next time? When you ask somebody that directly, if they don't take advantage of that, it's never happened to me that they haven't. They'll always say like, oh, well, next time you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this. You keep that in mind, and then you apply those learnings. Everyone's going to make mistakes. We're all going to make mistakes. I will probably make mistakes in this conversation with you, but afterwards, if I reflect thinking, the next time I do that, or I interact with someone, or they're asking me questions, maybe I want to do that in a different way. It's a process. It's not something that's static. And I think that might happen sometime, not just with IT professionals, but with thinking that if your university studies are going to mark your entire life, they will have a big impact on you. But I'm not the same. I'm 35 years old. I'm not the same person now as when I was 25 or when I was 15. It's an evolution. There are many things that are the same about my personality, about how I do things, but how I see the world and perhaps how I interact with people, I would like to think that I've improved, and that things have changed. So I think we really need to, it takes work. And that's also why some people don't want to do it. But I think it makes you a much healthier person if you're dialoguing with yourself and seeing what's going on with me, where am I at, what are my frustrations, what are my goals, am I actively trying to pursue them, what are small things I could be doing in my life to get me closer to the things that I want to be doing, what are the things that I would like to be doing more, the things I would like to be doing less. It's never going to be perfect, but if you're working on that balance, I think you'll find yourself to be much more enriched and I would say overall closer to yourself.
Okay, that's great. And you said currently you're leading a community for data Kubernetes.
Yeah.
So what does it take to lead a community? Like, what kind of effort does
That's
it
a really good question. And honestly, when I got involved, I was really, really scared because I was like, data on Kubernetes is very complicated. Like it's very innovative. It's a niche market. It's not a very common thing to be done right now. What I've realized though is that a lot of it goes back to, once again, is that if you're able to create a space where people are comfortable and that people are willing to share their ideas, where they're willing to make mistakes, where they're not afraid to ask beginner questions, that's kind of a definition of success. And it could be for data on Kubernetes. It could be for any topic. But what my job involves is getting speakers from different countries, from different backgrounds to talk about this topic, about the challenges that they've had and the things that have worked for them, so that it's easier then for other people to do the same thing. When we get that information out there, that generates questions. With questions come answers, and then also more questions. It's like you think about, that you're like putting breadcrumbs down, and as people eat more, then they get a taste for it, and they realize that they're interested and they want to continue with that. So a lot of my job is, like I said, facilitating a space where knowledge is being shared, where people are excited about helping other people, where people know that it's a space where they can go to get help. That's sort of the core element of the community, is understanding the challenges and the issues that your community has, so that then you can provide the adequate resources, which could be blogs, they could be videos, it could be podcasts, it could be interviews, it could be internships. All those things depend on the people that you're trying to serve. So our community has a certain background, or we can say ideals, or what we call like a buyer persona. Other communities, it will be slightly different. So they will provide other kinds of resources and a different kind of space.
Okay. But like Kubernetes data, isn't it a very narrow field? Or
it is, and that's exactly it. And the thing is, Kubernetes is it's a technology it's not terribly new, and its adoption is still ongoing in the world. In the Kubernetes ecosystem, we sometimes feel like everybody knows about it. But if I go to my neighbor's house right now and say, "Do you know about Kubernetes?" they're going to think I'm crazy. So like, and then inside the Kubernetes space, when you say, "No, we're the data on Kubernetes community," they're like, "What's that?" Like, if Kubernetes is a small but big topic, data is even bigger. So that's one of the challenges we actually have as a community, is trying to codify to make it specifically clear what we're talking about. Because some folks come into our community, we have to say like, I'm happy to have you here, but based on the things that you're looking for, I would recommend going to another community that's dealing with those things more specifically. Because as you said, it is for the moment a narrow field. We're trying to plant the seeds to make that field bigger.
Okay. But how do you manage to get speakers and more events for this? Like, I thought there would be very few of them.
Oh, good question. So we've been around for 1 year now, and we've had over 70 live streams. So we have a lot of content. We do at least 2 live streams every week. And going back to your question about finding those speakers, I do have the wonderful support from some different companies that have helped in the beginning of introducing me to people. And then what you have to do though is that, generally speaking, the best way to get people is through references. And how do you get references? By making sure that your speakers have a good experience. So what I try to do is to work on that as hard as I can, so that it's going to be more likely that we'll say, I really enjoyed this, and other people will too. So I'm going to introduce you to some people that I know. Then that sort of is like, I hate to use the word contagious in the time of COVID, but like it spreads very quickly. Like that positive energy. A lot of what a friend of mine from the CNCF, his name is Hippie Hacker, what he calls viral generosity. If you are really generous to other people, that can make them want to be generous to you and to others. So that I think is a core element that can kind of work in every community. In a more practical, technical sense, I meet people because of looking at blogs, because of watching other talks, and then I contact the speaker and I say, hey, this is our community. These are the things we're doing. I saw you gave that talk. Would you be interested in having a conversation with me to see if we could set up a time to have you on as a speaker? So I contact a lot of people through Twitter, through LinkedIn. I have quite a large network in LinkedIn because of previous jobs, so that helps too. I would say that making yourself visible is pretty important. You need to be easy to find. So I try to do that with my own personal brand. That's another thing. I'm not saying anybody needs to have the same brand as me. Everyone needs to be honest to their own personal brand, but like that is important to be visible in some way, like the conversation I'm having with you right now. Also, I would always say, once again, to be transparent. And because you never want to try to say that, oh, this is for everybody. You need to be very clear what your community is focused on, because you don't want people entering the community with certain kinds of expectations that then aren't met. That's really important. So yeah, but also as well, like I contact a lot of people who don't respond or never get back to me, and that's okay. Like maybe they're really busy. Sometimes you send a follow-up message. I never want to be bothering anybody. So, after a couple of messages, you say, okay, I'm just maybe later they'll find out. And sometimes it happens. Sometimes I'll contact somebody and 6 months later they'll say, oh, I didn't respond to the first message, but I saw one of your sessions on YouTube, and now I'm kind of interested. So everyone has, is at a different phase in their life, has different things going on. So you have to respect that. So there's a lot of trial and error, and you have to know that not everyone is going to reply to you. At least not in my case, it hasn't been that way. But it's really, really fun just because, like I said, I'm talking to you because of this. Like I get to meet people from all over the world. And I would say as much as possible, interact with people from different countries. There are things that are frustrating about it. You have to question your own values and the systems and culture in your own country, but it makes you a much more open person, I think, or at least it should. And you learn so much of different ways that people do things in different countries. And I find that to be extremely enriching.
Okay, cool. But when you started this community, I'm sure there were some hiccups. Like as the ball gets rolling, you have many people coming forward. But in the beginning, how did you have some problems, and how did you overcome?
Oh, that's a really good point. My solution from the beginning, because of, as I said, was being very, very afraid, is that I knew that I needed to build out a team. So luckily I have friends that are practitioners that have lots of experience working with, back-end technologies, containers, Docker, and also Kubernetes. So I immediately said, like, would you mind helping me out with this? And I'm very grateful because I got a lot of support from a lot of different people. That was very beneficial, but of course there were definitely hiccups. And I mean, like as well, like, our community wants to be vendor neutral, meaning we don't want someone coming in and just trying to sell something. But because of not, and also sometimes if you don't tell people what your community is about and what it's not about, it's not their fault if they come in and start doing something else. So that has happened like a couple of times, and that's kind of been like, oh, but once again, the mistake is okay. And it's normal to feel, upset or frustrated, but you just have to say, okay, the next time I'm not going to make the mistake. I'm going to learn, I'm going to do things in a different way. So it's just, iteration, progressively adding those improvements. I think, what it called like continuous improvement. I think that's very important. And other hiccups, technical difficulties. It is amazing that we're talking about extremely advanced technologies, and the amount of problems that I've had with things like Zoom has been exhausting. Or things like Meetup, like people not getting a calendar invitation, like all these technical details for me have been like quite overwhelming. So once again, it was like, okay, if I can get help with this, I'm going to get help. Don't feel bad about asking for help. The worst thing that can happen is that somebody says no. But just be very specific about the help that you need. That's also the thing too, is because I have lots of friends that said, I'm happy to help you, but you need to be very specific about exactly what it is that you're looking for. So that's a problem that I've had sometimes too, about being like, I just need you, but it's like, yeah, but what do you need me for? So being more specific in that sense. I want to apologize to all the people that have helped me and have probably had some headaches about not having things clear enough, but it's something that, once again, I'm continuously trying to get better at.
Okay. So what was your best experience in these days of leading the community?
I would say the ability to interact. Well, lots of different things actually. The ability to get young people involved, because their curiosity and energy is for me is fantastic, and it makes me more curious and energetic as well. So now I have a team of 4 wonderful interns and a student program manager that are doing a phenomenal job. They've only just started, but that's been really exciting to see that they're excited about being in the community. For me, just it makes me very grateful and feel that we've done a good job about creating a space where people want to be and where they feel comfortable. So that's definitely been a highlight. Obviously as well too, just in terms of seeing growth of numbers. Like when I started, I think we had like 120 people in our Slack. Now we have like 1,300. We've grown a lot in LinkedIn and Twitter and those spaces. Like I said, just the quantity, the amount of sessions that we've had is a good sign that things are going well. Our community being incorporated into the CNCF, that was also exciting. So there's just been a lot of different things, but because a lot of times as well too, like I said, is getting that feedback, is seeing that, okay, I've been working really hard on this. Sometimes you work sometimes really hard in a direction that maybe nobody asked you to do, or it's not really adding value. So that's a big lesson with everything that you're doing. Try to do things that can fail quickly so that you don't put too much effort into something that ends up being, and I don't believe in the idea of a waste of time, but I would say resources that could have been destined to something else. So I would say there's really been a lot of moments, but a lot of it's just been seeing like that genuine, honest feedback of like, okay, like I'm not crazy, like this is working, and it's producing results. And we still have a lot of work to do. Like this is only the beginning of the beginning, which is exciting. And as we've grown, more and more people have got involved to help out. Like I said, not just interns, but also very experienced working professionals. So I'm very grateful to have a team of really solid people because there's no way I could do this alone.
Okay, and best experience, as in, I mean, the best event or some memories.
Oh yeah, well in that sense, I mean we've had large events like in KubeCon. We had in May we had a co-located event, and we had a really good turnout on YouTube in terms of the amount of people that, you know, like the numbers were really solid on that. Well, our highest number of concurrent viewers was 327, which is really good. And also we did a live event where all the talks were not pre-recorded. So it was a very long day. And then the best and worst thing about events is when the event is over, that's when you have to do all the follow-up work. So there's even more work after you do a lot of it. But I would say that was really good. I also want to say too, for anyone who's interested in community management or, you know, leading communities, sometimes you can have a meetup with 5 people and it will be better than a meetup that you have with 500. So don't, and also depending on the outcomes that you're looking for, do you prefer 500 people that make your numbers look good, but aren't really engaged with your speaker or don't really care about the content? Or do you prefer a smaller number of people, but they get a lot of value out of it? So you can look at these things differently. And we've had meetups with very few attendees where the quality of the content was amazing. And then of course we have those videos, we put them on YouTube, and then that valuable content will be seen and shared by lots of other people.
Okay, that's nice. So one question, like suppose if somebody is studying in the college or just about to graduate, what would be your tips for him? How should they utilize the time in college or early years in profession when they have a lot of time?
That's good. Yeah, obviously, definitely recommend getting some kind of an internship or getting involved in some kind of a community. I have to say, I'm a CNCF ambassador. If anybody's interested in learning more about the CNCF, we also have a CNCF students group, and we're doing sessions just for students, which I really like doing. The energy level is really high. And all those questions, because I understand for students, they're really eager. Like they really want to get that knowledge. They want to get that experience. In the CNCF, there are a lot of ways to get involved, but one of the easiest ways to get involved is to, first of all, read the documentation. Do not go into a Slack and start saying, I would like to do an internship. Don't do that. Get into a Slack and say, how can I help? If you say that, people, that's the spirit that we work with in the CNCF, the values that we consider to be important. Same thing in the Data on Kubernetes community, as we are part of the CNCF. If you have that attitude and spirit, you do, and because a lot of times students will ask, what are the prerequisites? Do I need to have a level or certification? There's nothing that's required to get involved in the CNCF. You just need to be friendly and willing to help. We use the expression pay it forward, all right? Meaning give your time, be generous, and there are lots of different ways to help. Just being a friendly person and attending meetings once a week for an hour is enough. Like that's enough. And nobody expects you. You can just be there listening and learning, and then you can just start applying the knowledge that you're getting. They always have as well too beginner issues or bugs that can be dealt with by people that are just starting out. But I always say this, read the documentation first. When you read the documentation, then you'll have a lot of questions. Then you can start asking. People like questions, right? Because people like answering questions. And it's probable that your questions have probably been asked before, so they're even easier to answer. And sometimes they'll have frequently asked questions. So like all those things can be handled. But every single person who's in university and wants to get practical experience, get in the CNCF or some other foundation. I can only speak to the CNCF because I'm a part of it and very happy to be there. And I'm a non-technical person, but I'm contributing to Kubernetes by telling stories of young people or different contributors and the different things that they're doing. So that's something that like a way in which I get to be involved. So there are non-code contributions as well too. You don't just have to be writing in Golang or Rust or something like that. You can get to that eventually, but everybody understands, like, before you walk, you have to crawl. So that's okay. Like, everyone's been there and no one's going to judge you. It's a very, very welcoming space where, as long as you have a positive attitude, and like I said, it's not a good place. It's not that it's a bad, I'm not saying it's in general, the attitude that we're looking for is, how can I help? Not being really pushy of like, I want this, I want that, I want an internship. How can I get paid? That's not really going to get you very far. If you just walk in and genuinely say, I'm interested. Can somebody help me? I'm interested in, try to say, like, I want to work on Python. I want to work on Django. I want to work on Redis. The technologies that you like or that you're familiar with, start with those, and then you can change to others. But like I said, it's very, very easy to get involved. And going back to the soft skills thing, the number one thing that's important for working in on any CNCF project or in Kubernetes is a positive attitude and connecting well with people. That's super important. It's okay if you're shy or if you're an introvert and you don't like to have your camera on. Like, no one's gonna get angry about that either. Like, that's okay. Like, we have lots of different kinds of folks in our community. But the thing that really defines us is being a welcoming community that accepts everybody and that wants to help everybody learn and grow. So that's what I would say.
Okay, that's one very important point you said. Offer yourself instead of demanding. Instead of saying I want an internship,
I say that because I've heard it a lot, and I understand it when I see it. And the thing is, what that tells me is that that person is motivated, and that's a good sign. So we need to take that motivation, that energy, and channel that into something that's more beneficial and productive. But what I would say in general is that you will get much more help if you do your homework. Watch a couple of videos. We've got tons of resources for students. Like, there's no excuse to say, oh, I didn't know it exists. Go to Google it. Like, the amount of times that I have to send people screenshots of a Google search of, like, if you want to know about like, it's there. So just please take 10 minutes to watch a video or read something. And then you come in and say, hey, I read this article or I saw this video. I have these questions. Can you help me? That's a really good start. And then people are like, oh, this person is interested and they really care. If you come in and just say, like, I want a job, I want an internship, it's like, okay, let's circle back and first read these things, and then I would be more than happy to talk to you and more than happy to help you. But that's what I would say, whether it's the CNCF or anywhere else. Do your homework, and that will go much further. The Linux Foundation also has their own internships and mentorships and menteeships. All that information is on the webpage. All you have to do is type in that in Google, Linux Foundation internships, or mentorships, very easy to find. So that's another resource too. But like I said, do your homework and positive attitude, be friendly, and show that you're willing to help and that you want to contribute. That's really about it.
That's great. One question I think I should have asked you much before. What is CNCF?
Okay, so the CNCF is the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. So the CNCF is a mixture of different open source projects. And so they have been facilitating, we say is, like, they have these projects internally that are all open source that start at an early phase, and then they grow throughout the CNCF based on the amount of contributions and things that are going on, as well as being seen from a technical oversight committee. And there are many, many different companies participating in the CNCF. All the large cloud vendors that you know, they're in there, and lots of other companies, as well as end users, not the companies that are creating the technologies, but the companies that are consuming them. So, like, telecommunications companies, e-commerce companies, healthcare companies, governments, anyway, different sort of entities that are using these technologies, they also form part of it, so that they're directly giving feedback about, oh, I had this problem, or these things or what's going on in our company. These are the needs that we have. But all these projects that are there, they're all open source, meaning that different people from all over the world are writing the code, are contributing to those projects, are building them out, are reviewing the pull requests, are writing the documentation. That's what the CNCF is. It's this ecosystem, and it's, I understand when people go to the website, you see the CNCF landscape, you will see many, many, many projects. Don't worry, you don't need to know them all. You need to find the ones that best connect with the technologies that you're interested in or the skills that you want to develop. Kubernetes originally came from Google. Google has an internal tool called Borg. From that, Kubernetes was born. Kubernetes was donated by Google to the CNCF a few years ago. And so now the CNCF is the sort of, we can say, keeper of that project, right? So Kubernetes is obviously a very, very large project, but there are lots of other projects that are inside the CNCF, and then the different technologies that are used to make those things work.
Okay, that's great. I've given very nice inputs about how students should approach a community. I've seen a lot of people mess up there, and then they get a bad experience that no, nobody's helping me there. It's a question that they're asking is that's most
Yeah,
important.
what I always say is like you have to give some to get some. So think about and also once again, because I understand if you're 20 years old, you're going to think, but what can I give? A positive attitude and being friendly is a lot. Like that's a great thing to give. That's a really nice thing to give somebody. So enthusiasm and good energy, like that is seriously the number one thing that you can do. Once you do that, a lot of people are going to be like, this person is awesome. Of course I'm going to help them. Like that's going to be the result from that. But first go to some meetings, read the documentation, show up with some questions, be patient. Also, that's another thing that students I don't know. It's like I said, the impatience shows me, okay, you're very motivated, but also you need to learn to be patient. You don't need to send someone, if you send someone 5 messages and they don't respond, they're probably never going to respond. Give them time. Like if you want some follow-up, like that's okay, but everybody has a life and a personal life and a professional life and all these other things going on. So always keep that in mind that you're a student. So you have your studies and then your friends and things like that. And that's a lot too. Like, don't get me wrong, there's plenty, but it's okay if it takes someone a day or two to respond to you. So don't worry about that. Like just be proactive, go study something else, go watch some videos, go attend a meetup, go write some code, do some other things. That's another thing I would say as well. Personal projects, develop some personal project. It doesn't matter if it's successful or not. That is a hugely important thing for your personal brand. For companies, one of the first things a company is going to do is they're going to look at your GitHub repo. They want to see like, what kind of code have you been writing? Show me your stuff. Like you might have a certificate from this university or that place or this place or whatever. But what I really want to see is how do you work technically? And then how are you as a person? I have to be thinking, is this person going to be difficult for my team? Are they going to cause me problems? Are they really pushy and demanding? Is that the right cultural fit for our company? When I say cultural fit, I'm not saying what country you're from. I'm saying based on the kind of company that it is, what kind of culture they have as a company. And that's the thing, everybody's different. So be conscious of who you are as a person, and that can kind of help you have a better idea of where you want to work. Microsoft might sound very attractive, but maybe it doesn't match up with your values. Or Amazon. I'm not saying Microsoft might be great. I'm just using them as an example. But just because a company has a really big name doesn't mean it's necessarily the right company for you. Maybe you work better in smaller startups. That's okay. But what I want to say there is like, you definitely want to be developing your personal brand. And I see more and more students actually doing this. I'm actually participating in a talk next week with some students that are in the Microsoft Learning Group. And so I see more and more students that are organizing these kind of initiatives. That's really cool too. And also like, don't worry, like, or if you just want to focus it on talks about video games or talks about mobile application, whatever the kind of things that you like to do, you can start creating that kind of content. And if you're shy, you don't have to create the content. You can edit the videos, you can edit the podcast, you can run the website. There are lots of different roles. It's not just the person with a microphone who's talking. There are a lot of different things that can be done there. So everyone can have a role to play. But for me, it's really energizing to see the amount of young people that I'm seeing now in different universities that are doing these things, because that's something that when you go to apply for jobs, you say like, I've been leading a community for free for the last 2 years. And these are the things that we've talked about. And we have this many videos and this many blog posts and this many community members. I think that those kind of things are really, really helpful apart from just your university degree.
That's good. I'm sure most new students will be able to benefit from your insights.
Hope so.
I told them about the importance of soft skills, about approaching your community, and some things that are really required. That's really great input for you. Thanks a lot. Thank you for joining.
My pleasure.
Really
and if anybody wants to reach out, they can always jump in the Data on Kubernetes Slack. You can find me on Twitter. Also check out the CNCF. Also check out the CNCF students group. There is no question that's too basic. There is no such thing as a silly question. But like I said, come in with that positive attitude, and we will give you as much help as we can. So that's my only thing. But thank you very much for having me. It was great to be here. And hopefully be seeing you around. So yeah.
Great. Thanks.
Take care.